We are ready to come back together for the workshop portion of our morning program. We are blessed to have Dr. David Lane with us. Session on counseling techniques for non-counselors. He has served in ministry for over 40 years, served churches in, served as the minister of the East Cotton congregation, the Berkeley Heights congregation in St. Louis, Missouri. He served at the Marcellus Avenue Church of Christ for, I believe it's 11 years as the minister here, and is now working with the Southern Hills Church of Christ. He is known throughout our brotherhood and even outside of our brotherhood. He's an author, he's an excellent orator, minister of the Word of God, who does not just preach well, but also ministers to others and is sought after. And so we just appreciate him for being here. And again, we are recording our sessions. They're not being live streamed, but they are being recorded so that we can post them at a later date and so that others can benefit from the great material that is being presented here at the Texas State Lectureship. So without further ado, we will welcome Dr. David Lane to the podium to talk to us about counseling techniques for non-counselors.
Let me say good morning to all of you that I have not had an opportunity to speak to. We're grateful for the opportunity to be here and to be a part of the Texas State Lectureship. And I want to acknowledge I'm not playing hooky. I've got 3 commitments for this week, so I'm doing my session today, and I have 3 days of training when I leave here in another city, and then I go to New Jersey for Friday. So this is kind of a nice weekend in COVID season. I'm enjoying being in this season, and when you are, in fact, I had a birthday yesterday. I'm in that last season of my life and have been for a little while. I tell people, you know, when you are between, you're born in the spring. So if you're between 1 and 20 years old, you're in the spring. If you're between 20 and 40, you're in the summer. Between 40 and 60, you're in the fall. If you're over 60, you're in the winter. Now, we're just praying that it's a long winter. If God says the same, I'll be going out to Newark, New Jersey on Friday. The church is celebrating Dr. Lawton's 85th birthday. That's the club I want to be in. Yeah, if I'm going to be in winter, I certainly want it to be a long winter. So we thank God for being like Dr. Maxwell, who was in that age group, and Dr. Washington, Freeman White. We don't have many more. I've been asked to do counseling techniques for non-counselors. When they gave me this assignment, I presupposed that the persons who would be a part of this session would be ministers and church leaders who were interested in ministering to their people. So I prepared a handout so that you will not have to take copious notes. I would have, and I know this is dangerous, I probably should have given it to you before I did my presentation, because you'll sit there and you'll read it and you won't pay any attention to me. But if that's what you need to do, you do that. But I wanted you to have the information that I'm going to be giving is a little technical, and I wanted to make sure that you have it when the session is over, that you will be able to go back and in your meditation, and especially in your contemplative meditation. I think for all of us who are growing Christians, we have the opportunity to be able to not only live life from a biblical standpoint of understanding principles, we have to live life from the standpoint of witness. We have to practice what we preach. That Christianity is not just belief, it's behavior. So every person that you meet, every person that you have to minister to, is a person and a place where God desires to dwell. So when we are in the helping business, we are in the soul care business as a church. Everybody that we meet has some hurt, some habit, and some hang up that they're having to deal with. That's why Psalms 107 and verse 20 says, He sent His word and healed the land and delivered them from their destruction. In other words, there is therapeutic value in the word of God. He said there is healing. He sent His word and healed the land and delivered them from their destruction. So there are two things that destroy us. Those two things are going to be our habits and our hangups. So every person who comes into our purview as a minister, as a church leader, as an elder, will be a person who is struggling with some hurt, some habit, or some hang. So everything that I do, as I said, I'll be leaving here and going to Austin, doing some work for the government. So whether I'm in a church setting or a governmental setting or in an educational setting, it really doesn't matter. People are going to be people in all of those venues. And we can't necessarily teach the Bible at the schoolhouse or for this training that I'm going to be doing for the government project. But I'm going to have to teach biblical principles, because everything that is true, we may label it to some degree differently, but it's going to be a principle from the Bible, because all truth comes from God. Understanding the differences, discussing boundaries between pastoral care and pastoral counseling. There are three stages of depth in the caring ministry. Every congregation is going to have some kind of caring ministry. We typically like to talk about our shepherds, and that's the biblical terminology. Shepherds, shepherd. But a shepherd is a pastor. And so in the real life world, that's called pastoral care, when we are taking care of the people. So what our elders do is called actually pastoral care. And most growing churches have some ministry of pastoral care. You may not label it that, but pastoral care includes work. So we call it senior citizens ministries. Okay, that's our terminology in the body of Christ. But because, we don't know where this is going to go, so we at least for the seminary students and for people who are in graduate school, we're discussing pastoral care. So at least know the terminology. Pastoral care includes work with the elderly, the infirm, the shut-in, the hospital patients, prisoners, students, those going through grief, despair, hunger, shock, etc. So pastoral care is the relationship that we have with people to help them get through these difficult circumstances and situations that they live in. Now, so all of our ministries that involve senior citizens and the community impact, all of those kinds of things, are going to fall under what is called pastoral care. As you minister to people, as you employ the principle of discipleship, when Jesus said, go into all the world and preach the gospel, literally he's saying, as you go and minister to people, you're going to meet people who have these struggles. As you distribute food, as you take care of community impact, whatever picture that may look like, you are going to wind up having to minister to people. So there are going to be people who are going to be in the food line or the health. When I served here at Marcellus, we operated a life management center, and in my retirement years as interim minister for the Southern Hills congregation, I'm really the administrator for their life management center. And that's the vehicle for community impact. Because growing churches now, and thank God, part of the work that I'm doing in this season of my life is to sit on a board for the Department of Health and Human Services. And the government is finally discovering that the best way to minister to people is going to be through faith-based organizations. Because a church who really is able to do a paradigm shift and do ministry differently is going to have to, whether you call it a life management center or not, you're going to have to help people manage their lives. Because a life management center is designed, a life management center is a wellness center for community care. So that's the tagline. So if you do ministry in the 21st century to make an impact, you're going to discover that a life management center or any real community impact has to center on being a wellness center for community care. That means then that we help people deal with their pains, their problems, and their perspectives that are not healthy. In other words, a life management center is designed to deal with the whole person. So a faith-based organization is in the best position to really help people because you're dealing with body, soul, and spirit. The government can't do that. So when you distribute food, when you have a partnership with a clinic to deal with health screening and employment and all of those kinds of things, you are doing that to minister to people. So when you do your food distribution, this congregation several other congregations across the country and the state have been able to bless people with free food or food that they are able to get a discount. I know Brother Berry of the Dallas West congregation have participated in the food bank business. We no longer should be buying goods that the government can give to us for free because we pay taxes like the Baptists, the Methodists, and the Presbyterian people. So we got to learn how to do that. But when you are doing that, you are ministering to people. So you're not just passing out food, you ought to expect those people to have a place. Now this is where your evangelism comes in. You offer an opportunity for people who are dealing with these hurts and these habits and these hang-ups to have a safe place to get some help. And that's what this workshop is about. You don't have to be a licensed therapist to be able to help people. So there are 3 levels of counseling help in a congregation. We were suggested that pastoral care is one level of ministry to people. Pastoral counseling is another area. And the reason, and we have to be careful, that if you're going to, in a church situation, if you're going to use the word counselor, you have to always put pastoral in front of it. Because you have latitude in a church to pastor people. Those of us who happen to be ministers, who are therapists, have a license, and we charge. Churches operate with pastoral care under the guise of a ministry to our church. But you can't do pastoral counseling without some skills. That's why you have this workshop. That's why you have workshops like this. It's so that you can pick up skills to further your contribution to the members who come to you who have problems. There are 3 levels of counseling help in a congregation. Level 1 is encouragement. I do a whole workshop on encouragement counseling because you really want to teach everybody in the congregation to learn how to do encouragement counseling. Encouragement counseling is being able to develop active listening skills. That people cry out for help. They don't come and say, I got a problem, will you help me? In their life situations, they give you scenarios, they talk about things, and you have to hear what they're saying and what they're not saying to be able to pull out of it. So I'm not going to deal with active listening skills for this workshop. They are asking me to deal more with level 2, which is exaltation. Exaltation is the level of counseling that is done by a minister or a shepherd. 3rd level of counseling in a church situation we call enlightenment, and that's done by a professional therapist. So since my emphasis is not going to be on encouragement, that's a level of training that you want to teach all of the members to learn how. Our specific task for this morning is to give you a counseling model that will help you do exaltation counseling. Now there are 3 serious problems we need to lay out before we get into the pastoral counseling model. Number 1, a person who considers himself or herself competent in one area may falsely assume competence in another. So because you know the Bible, and because you can pray, and because you are qualified as a minister or an elder, does not mean you are competent in the area. So you need to understand there are limitations to your training. Because if you find yourself in over your head and you don't know, and you don't realize that you're in over your head until you're in over your head. And it takes a great deal of professional and spiritual wisdom to know where your limitations lie. That even those of us who are professional therapists, it's like a doctor. We have areas of specialization. And so once there are general things that we could do, but there are some things that are beyond beyond our pay grade. Just yesterday, I got a call from my live broadcast. We extended an invitation during our worship service for people to call a help number. And I visited one of the people who called in from worship service yesterday. Has a son with Down syndrome, and he had been violent. He's a pretty good sized fellow, and she really needed encouragement. Now that's not my area of specialization. I was able to give her encouragement, but I turned her over to someone who really deals with autism and Down syndrome patients and whatever. See my point? So even those of us who've done this 40 years or so have to know our limitations. So as a church leader, you have to do something. The second is boundaries have to be set. You know, there's a certain amount of professionalism that goes into working with people. Confidentiality is extremely important. You know, there are three kinds of information. There is what is called privileged information. Well, let's start. There is what is called communal information. Communal information is the information that's the word communal. You hear community in it? It's suggested that information that is open to in the public domain. In other words, if you were riding down the road, you get arrested for driving under the influence and winds up in the newspaper, your business is all over. That's communal information. Then there is what is called privileged information. Privileged information is the information that professionals have on a need-to-know basis. In other words, I may very well be given information as a minister, and in order to help you, I may need to talk to your physician. But I can't talk to your physician without your permission. But the fact is, your physician will give me information to help you. And it's called privileged information. That works in a church. That you may deal with one of the elders to tell your story. And of course, with privileged information, we can deal with, we do deal with scenarios, because you can get another opinion. One therapist can get another opinion from another therapist. Now we're not discussing the person by name, because in counseling situations, to protect your confidentiality, you have numbers anyway, and not names. So one therapist to another will discuss scenarios and situations and not necessarily know the person we're talking about. In a church situation, privileged information looks like you tell an elder your confidence, and the elder has to use his judgment to say, is this information that's going to affect the church? So I may have to give a general purview of what I'm dealing with to the whole eldership. don't give all details because they took me into confidential. That's what privileged information is. Those are shades of what privileged information is. But then confidential information means that what you share with me in confidence, I can't share with anybody else, including my wife, who may happen to be my best friend. So if you say something to me in confidence, you are supposed to be saying it to me, believing that it's just between us. So even though you're in a church situation and not in a therapist situation like Brother Ross and some of the other people who are therapists, we have licensure that we have to protect because we can get sued. But even in a church, it is inappropriate and ungodly for someone to share something with you in confidence and you share it with somebody else. Okay? That's the boundary portion of the handout that I'm dealing with. See how this works? You can have my handout, but you're not going to get everything I'm going to say on that handout. You already got that figured out. That's why you can have it. Number 3. The other challenge that you need to be aware of as you do lay encouragement and pastoral counseling is be aware that many ministers and church leaders have a tendency to sometimes become threatened by professional therapists. It's an ego. It's a power. But just be aware that you need to guard yourself. You are in the business of helping people. So the professional therapist that is a part of your church staff or ministry is a part of your team. Nobody has expertise in everything. So you need to get comfortable with it. It makes no sense to have a person, my twin brother happens to be a member of Marcellus congregation, and he helped me with the life management center. He's a professional licensed drug counselor. 25 years. Why would you have 4 or 5 people in your congregation who do drug counseling and grief counseling and all of that every day for a living? Why would you have them as a part of your congregation and not allow them to help you do that kind of work? So you create ministries. You create a counseling ministry to allow the professional people to contribute because they are a part of your team. That's one less person you have to deal with as a shepherd. That's one less person you have to deal with as a minister. So the more people who are social workers, and all social workers are trained to do counseling. So if you have in your congregation social workers and therapists, you need to utilize them by organizing some ministry to allow them to assist you. So when you do the interview where you are able to give the biblical exhortation for whatever people are dealing with, you send them to somebody who is more qualified. That should not be a threat. You should see that as a blessing. Am I making sense? All right. I'm going to now introduce you to what I call a 7-step problem management model. Since most of the people that you will minister to in your congregation will come to you with hurts, habits, and hang-ups, most of the counseling, pastoral counseling that you're going to have to do is going to be problem management. So, several years ago, I think 1986, I developed what I call a 7-step problem management model to be able to teach ministers and church leaders who are not necessarily licensed to be a therapist to be able to help people with their problem. So, let's go through the 7 steps. And then I'm going to give you some here, give you an opportunity to kind of walk through that. So what you're doing in an hour's time, you are getting a whole course in pastoral counseling in 1 hour. And you know that's almost an impossible task. But this is the benefit you get from being part of something like the Texas State Lectureship where you have real training. So if you were taking this course at a college or a seminary, you'd have a whole semester to basically deal with what I'm dealing with in this 1 hour. 7-step problem management model. We'll go through, understand the steps, then I'm going to show you how to work it. Number 1, when a person comes to you, they're going to come because they have accepted and recognized that they have a problem of some sort. Most of life is about the decisions that we make. All right? Now, if I were doing this same workshop for some of the work that I do for the government, we wouldn't be talking about a 7-step problem management model in a church situation. We would be calling it crisis intervention. It's the same thing. We're just changing lingo for a different situation. So when you hear on television or somebody talk about calling a helpline and taking a course on crisis intervention in a school or a government agency is the same as problem management in church. A person is in a crisis. A crisis is when you are facing a situation of some sort that's bigger than the resources that you normally have to work with. That's what a crisis is. Anytime you have a situation that you are forced to deal with that's bigger than the resources that you normally have to work with, that for you is a crisis. So most of the people, isn't it interesting? Most of the people don't come to us at church as a minister or an elder until they are in crisis. Very few people call us up and say, I was just thinking about you today, and I just wanted to be able to see how you're doing. I just called to love on you. No. Every call, 99% of every call we get is from somebody in a crisis. Yeah. Somebody ought to help me right about here. You know what I'm saying? So when a person calls you to talk to you, they only call in because they recognize and they've accepted the fact that they've got some kind of situation or problem that they need to work with. Second step in this problem management model is you have to analyze the problem. You got to be able to dissect it, to simplify it, to learn the ins and outs of the problem. You got to view it as much as you can with as much clarity as you can. So you got to be able to analyze. Now, it's in this stage that you have to understand that the presenting problem is very seldom ever the core problem. Now, that's what you want to write down for that analyze. So what you're analyzing is you're listening to discover the difference between the presented problem and the core problem. What people present to you is very seldom ever the real problem. It's the symptom. Okay. If there is a spider web in that corner, and I say to the building manager, I noticed a spider web has developed in that corner. Will you take care of it? And they go and sweep down the spider web. Have they taken care of the problem? No. Because the spider web is not the problem, is it? What is the problem? The spider. If you don't find that spider, if you don't kill that spider, come on now. If you don't kill that spider, what is he going to do? You'll tear that web down and he'll weave one somewhere else. So when people come to you with problems, they're coming and they're discussing the spider web. You got to help them identify the spider. Third step is you got to define. You got to define the problem. You got to call it something. You got to call the spider the spider. You got to define the problem. You got to be able to call it something. So once you call it something, now you got to brainstorm. You got to generate as many ideas as you possibly can to see how we can solve it. So if we identify a situation, then in the brainstorming portion, what we are dealing with is, what are my options? What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the advantages or the disadvantages? This is what I'm dealing with. This is what we call it. So, how do I go about solving it? What are my options? In the brainstorming session, you are not trying to figure out the best option. You're just trying to generate as many as you can. It is in the next step that you're going to figure out the best option. So you don't just put the options on the table because they're good, because sometimes you need to have the bad options on the table so people can make the contrast. I'm going to give you a scenario. This will make a lot more sense in a moment. So you recognize the problem and accept the problem. Step 2, you analyze the problem. Step 3, you define it, you call it something. Step 4 is you brainstorm. You come up with as many options as you can. And number 5, you choose the best possible solution to the problem at the present time. So you select out of all the options, what is the best option? Number 6, you implement it. You do it. You put your idea into action. So implement means, okay, we have this option, and you're going to put a timeline on being able to do what you say you're going to do. Because now, we're going to give you 7 days or 14 days to do whatever you're going to do, because you're going to have to come back and we be able to evaluate if it works. Does anybody not understand the steps? All minds good? Okay, so let's work a scenario. So we're going to do this together. We have a gentleman who comes to the eldership and he says, I'm depressed. Haven't been able to eat, haven't been able, I've just been so aggravated, so depressed for the last few days that I'm not myself, so I decided I really get to come talk to someone. So, your job as a therapist is to learn how to ask questions. I could spend a whole lecture on teaching you how to ask the right question. We don't have that kind of time with an hour. We gotta be able to get good at asking questions, because solutions can only be found when you are good at asking the right questions. So the gentleman comes. His presenting problem is what? Depression. So I want to know. So has there anything happened on your job? Has anything happened in your family situation or in your personal relationship that have you depressed? What has happened that makes you think you're depressed? That's the question. So he says, well, I tell you, it's really my job. I've been the assistant manager at a medical center where we do social services for 12 years. And the manager took another job, and the manager's job came open. And they gave that job to a young white boy that had a degree and 2 years experience. I got 30 years experience. And I'm mad because it's a race thing. I mean, I am the person that should have gotten that job. Okay. So, have you talked to your supervisors about why you didn't get the job? No, I already know. It's me because I'm a black man, and this boy is an Anglo guy, and he's young. What is the presenting problem? Anybody? What is the presenting problem? He presented that he's depressed. But is that really the problem? So what do we call his problem? What is his real problem? Anybody? Give me a hand. What do you see as the real problem that he has to address? He feels like he's been discriminated against. That's part of the problem. Anybody add anything to that? So we see that he has some other problems. He may be guilty of unconscious racial bias. So now we've got that as possible. I think he's got some anger issues too. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was going to say anger, and then I noticed you said that the white man has a degree, but not sure if applying.
Yeah, he has a master's. He has the same degree that the young man has, but he has experience. The young man, he has nearly 30 years of experience, and the young man has 40. So what we gonna call this problem? His problem is he has been dismissed, and he's having to deal with that dismissal. That's the core problem. Dealing with that core problem has revealed some additional personal problems. Because now we're going to ask him, what kind of evaluations have you gotten across the years on your job? Are you absolutely sure that this is just about race? Are there any performance? Well, now, I have been written up a time or two for being late. So, we identified the problem, we kind of analyzed it, we called it something. So let's brainstorm. What options do we have for trying to address the core problem? The core problem that we got to solve is he's been dismissed from his job and he has to react to it. Because I forgot to tell you, they had nerve enough to hire this young white boy and they won't be the trainer. I'm good enough to train, but they don't see me as good enough to have the job. So what's the core problem that we got to solve? You have been dismissed. Oh, well, I guess being dismissed is not the term. It's part. You have not been elevated or promoted. So what options do you have? They're asking you to train. So what option do I have? Because my time is running out. I got about 10 minutes.
Yeah, till 11:15.
Really? Okay. I got a long time. I thought I had 10 minutes. I got 25. All right. So let's think out loud. What options do you have? So let's write them down. Okay. Number one, he has to make a decision on whether he's going to train this boy or not. So we got to put that on the table. Who's going to be my official scribe? Brother Mansley, Brother Elder, thank you. All right. So one option is you got to train. You got to train this guy or not train. What other option do you have? I can appeal my case to a higher authority. What other option do I have? That's not the best option, but that is an option. I can't quit my job. And if I am going to quit, I really don't want to quit without having another one in place. I can't just get angry and quit. Okay, quitting is an option.
Another thing maybe is, and this lady is saying the bill, but making people aware that he wants to be promoted, because not everybody wants to.
Okay. One option is to make sure that you follow the right protocols to being in the pool to be promoted. So, Elder Van Taylor going to figure out a way to shorten that to make sense. But the point is, there has to be a procedure for promotions, and we need to make sure that you follow that protocol. So that's an option. All right? Well, we brainstorm. Good ideas, bad ideas. See, in this section, it's more about the more options you generate, the more choices that you have. Anybody think of anything else? So another one is, accept the fact that it may not be your time for promotion. You may desire to be promoted, but you may not skill-wise or emotionally be ready for it. So, write that down. Okay. All right, well,
I try to learn what were his deficits, what were the reasons that he did not do the job.
have you asked?
Yeah, ask.
So that's the point. That was the one I was thinking. Have you inquired as to why you were not promoted? You making these assumptions. Have you really inquired as to why you were not? Anybody else? So,
Are you being honest with yourself?
say what now?
Is he honest with himself?
Right. Have you been honest with yourself to determine? Okay. Anybody else got an option you want to put on the floor? All right. So brother Elder, what is our list? So I'm gonna go through the list. So now we're gonna take the list. We're gonna do pros and cons. What's the advantage and disadvantage with the option that's there? So let's discuss what that looks like. So what is the first one?
Let's take the last one first. Has he been honest with himself as to why he didn't get the job?
Okay, so let's start with that. So talk to me about what qualifications you have that you think make you qualified, or what weaknesses do you have from a personal standpoint. So just talk to me about it. So let's build this character. So what do you think he might say if he's honest? He says, I'm qualified because I got experience. Okay, so experience is one qualification, but that's not the only qualification for a job.
He may or may not. He may have kind of gotten to a certain level and has not maintained operating skills and expertise. I've been at this level, I've been doing this job, but I do it the same way I did it 30 years ago, and now the current state of affairs is different, so he hasn't upgraded to stay competitive.
Right. So have you upgraded to stay competitive? That's a nice interest. So let me throw something into the mix since we're having this discussion. We got a little extra time. It wasn't, it needed, but it wasn't part of my wisdom lecture. Okay. So I do some life coaching as well. Businesses with managers, or when you get to a certain level, one of the fringe benefits is they pay for life coaching to kind of challenge you. It's kind of like your personal coach who challenges you to grow. And so those of us who do a little bit of life coaching for business and professional people have to help people, because this is the new lingo. Now, we all know what IQ is, intellectual quotient. So you get a job because you have this intellectual capacity and you have all these skills that go with your IQ. So you get a job most of the time because you have a high IQ and you have a skill set that's commensurate with your IQ. People who are hiring managers realize I may hire you for your IQ, but you got to work with these other people. So I have to also look at your EQ, emotional quotient, your ability to handle crises, your ability to handle difficult people. Now, 25 years ago when I wrote my book on stress management from the 23rd Psalm, all stressed up and no place to go. The buzzword in psychology and psychotherapy was stress. Now, one of the two things that everybody's talking about now is trauma and adaptability. So there is now something called AQ, adaptability quotient. how are you able to adapt to change in real time? So if you're going to be competitive in the 21st century, you may have a tremendous IQ and the skill set that is commensurate. But what about your EQ? How do you get along with other people? How do you handle anger and depression and resentment and all those things? Or some of the workshops that I'm doing next month for college and university on cultural diversity, dealing with conscious and unconscious racism and bias. Because sometimes we are racially biased and don't realize it. And it affects how we make decisions. So all of these things are now considered for you to be a valuable person in management. So you're no longer talking about just having skills, is my point. Elder Manzay's point was, you may have gone to school and taken advantage of every workshop and seminar that they had to offer, but you didn't work on your EQ. And you don't even know what EQ is. So that young boy who happened to be Anglo may very well be more conversant in all three, and you're only competent in one. That's the point. Yes, sir.
An example of that today has to do with technology. You may be very skilled as a therapist or whatever the job is, but as technology changes, you have to adapt to that.
Right.
And in my work experience, I was in sales, I was a manager, but I had people, we went from writing down pretty much our cards, our sales calls, to having to input them into a computer, email them every day. I had all those salespeople who didn't want to make that adaptation, back to your point. So here's somebody who's very experienced, but what happens when we have experiences, we get set in our ways, and so we don't want to adapt to now daily reports on the computer, and it's got to go 6 people. Whereas before, I just saw my clients and that was it.
All right. Anybody else wanted to ask this man?
Yeah, and it's so funny you bring this up because ageism is a big deal. I work for a high-tech company, eBay, and this same scenario is being in the tech field for 30 years, 30 years. Same thing happened where younger managers are 20, I'm ready to retire. So with ageism, they're looking at, you can keep the skill sets up and all those different things, but they're saying, well, you're getting ready to retire, and because I've been in the field for 30 years, I'm at this level of income, they can bring in the...
2 people.
It's about
They pay 2 people for yourself.
So he may be thinking it's racism, and it could be bottom line, because a lot of the companies, the bottom line, because they keep saying, Francine, when are you retired? I ain't retired yet.
All right.
Yeah. So it's kind of, so you can bring in someone that's less money, but in the same thing, you're talking about that AQ, and I was like, because they did choose someone in, and I remember, I was like, okay, and you want me to train them too?
Yeah, this is a real life situation. So, yeah, this is not something made up. This is real life. All right, I'm gonna take care of you. We don't have enough money. I know for those who are listening to this, I'm not sure that they are able to hear your comments, and this is part of the session.
Yes, sir. Just a question. For this gentleman, does his original motivation for wanting to be promoted, does that come into the conversation at all? Whether it's financial or ego or any of those things?
Yeah, I think that comes in, that comes in to looking at being honest with yourself. So that would kind of that discussion. All right. Brother Man, say what's the next one?
Another one is appeal the case to a higher level.
All right. So what is the advantage of appealing the case to a higher level? What's the advantage or disadvantage of going to a higher level to let them know your concern? It's like filing a grievance. What's the disadvantage of that? Can you think of any?
I think the advantage is for him to convey his feeling perhaps about this young guy coming in for the job.
All right.
Probably help him, his emotion.
Right. So it's going to help him. Anybody else? Any other advantage?
Well, mine was actually a disadvantage.
Okay. So what's the disadvantage?
Retaliation from the.
Right. So you need to prepare yourself that they may retaliate. Okay. See, we didn't put down, you can sue. And that's a good way to get fired. But that is what.
Yeah, one of the things that we inquire why he was not promoted.
Right.
That kind of takes.
Kind of goes into both of them.
Yeah.
So you would appeal to a higher level, and it's at that point that you probably want to go to the person who decided not to give you the job to find out why they didn't give you the job before you go to the higher level. Right?
Exactly.
So what's the next one, brother? Man, say.
Well, we had quit the job. You may point about that before. Did he follow the protocol to promotion?
Right.
In terms of expressing a desire to go into it. Accept the fact that it's not his time.
Okay. So out of that list, because our time is kind of getting away from us, out of that list, what is the best option? Would you agree to go to the person to find out why you were not chosen to be promoted? And if it was an unfair disadvantage of overlooking, then you get a chance to appeal to a higher court. See how this works? So then we go on to select one. And so today is Monday. So in 7 days, do you think you can go and talk to your supervisor, have that interview with him, and then come back and we talk about how that went? See how that works? So now we get a chance in 7 days to evaluate. That's kind of how this model works. This is simple. This is doable. This is what ministers and church leaders, this is a place to start until you get more training. But see how that works? Now, he comes back in 7 days and he says, so how did things go? Well, they explained to me that, well, number one, he went into file cabinet and pulled out a file of all the time that I've been late. I'm supposed to be at work at 8 o'clock, and he showed how many times I came to work at 10 minutes unpaid, 15 minutes unpaid. And that was the first thing. How can I manage people and expect them to be on time? And I have trouble being on time myself. The second is that my performance evaluation did kind of, I told you, I mentioned to you that they kind of broke up a little bit on that. But he also pointed out that while I have attended all the workshops and the seminars with the company, and I got continuing education hours in my field, that they don't feel that I've done as well as EQ portion. And managing people, as the assistant manager, I was buffered from a lot of that because the manager had to deal with that. As the manager, those were skills that I guess I didn't realize I needed to have. So, after evaluating, I did ask him, so tell me what I need to do to be ready for the next job. Now, do you feel like we helped this brother? That's as much as a minister or church leader can do. A therapist couldn't do it more. See how simple that is? The more you do it, the better off you are. Now, in your packet, if you turn over to page 3, what I've done is I've given you a diagnostic worksheet. So what you want to do is make copies of this. Everybody, did they have it? Yeah, I've got one up here. Okay. I've got 2 here that I can give somebody else. Okay. All right. So the diagnostic worksheet is you make copies of this, and this is sort of like when you're talking to a person, you got something to write on. You could go through the 7 steps and be able to have this sort of, as you're taking notes, as you're talking, and you have something to work with to make it easier for you. So that you don't necessarily have to memorize the steps, because the worksheet will help you work the steps and be your guide. So we've been tweaking this across the years. This is the best we've been able to come up with to help people in this situation. So, are there any general questions, specific questions that you wanna ask? I got 5 minutes. Any input? Any questions for clarity or any input? Brother Berry, let him have the mic.
As a not licensed counselor in providing pastoral counseling, are there anything you can give us to know when we should send that person to a professional?
All right. Thank you for asking, because that's how I was going. We solve the immediate problem of dealing with the job situation right now. So what were the issues that we say that he needed to deal with? Racial bias, anger management, probably time management, work late. So do you see the 3 areas? Now those are the areas. Now you send him to the trained professional that you have with your staff. You may not be as skilled in teaching time management, or teaching anger management, or procrastination issues. That's when so your job as a pastoral counselor is to identify the core problem that brought them to you, and the additional symptoms that were revealed as a result of that situation, and then you send them to the professional. See the point? Now you go to the therapist, you go to the life management center, and let them help you work with anger management and your racial bias and your time management. See how it works? All you do as a pastoral counselor is to help them identify the immediate crisis. This is why it's called crisis intervention. They had a crisis to come. You solve the crisis, and now you refer them to deal with those other issues to somebody who is more equipped. Best question to be asked at this point. See how this works? All you are trained to do. So if you haven't had any training in these other areas, don't be trying to do racial training, anger management, and all of that. That's beyond your pay grade. See how that works? All you do, because see, as a church leader, as a minister, you don't want people to come to you and you can't do anything for them. This allows you to take advantage of the trust factor that led them to you. You help them, you provide some Bible admonishment for them, pray for them, and send them to your therapists. That's how a church should do ministry on this level. Brother Manson.
And what happens here is you literally stop the person from doing further harm to themselves. Because very often in this scenario, the guy can come in saying, like, I'm going to quit, or I'm going to go and retaliate in some way. And if you can kind of help that go down and have him look at some of the factors, that prevents him from really making his situation worse, where he's going to get fired from that job and nobody else is going to hire him in the industry because the work's going to go out of it. So you
have really helped save a brother's job, and you help a member have a better quality of life.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Oh. Yes, sir.
This is a question, how do you deal with
Hang on, you're going to bring it, Mike.
How do you deal with that person, sir, who really wants to come back and repeatedly dwell on problem definition, but never gets to implementation?
On the second go round, you have to confront him and say, now, are you really just wanting to vent, or do you want to solve the problem? And if you just want to vent, I'll sit here and let you take a few minutes and talk about your problem. But now I can't do this much, because I need to give my hour to somebody who wants it. I appreciate the opportunity. As you can tell, I enjoy being a minister who happens to be a psychologist or psychotherapist who happens to be a minister. I enjoy this. Thank you for the invitation. I hope this has been helpful, that you'll be able to honor and glorify God. So,